Catherine Brennan checked the IV drip for the fourth time in 12 minutes. Not because anything was wrong. The flow rate was perfect. The saline bag hung at precisely the right height. The catheter site showed no inflammation. She checked because precision calmed the tremor in her hands that no one else could see. Room 217. Afternoon light slanting through half-closed blinds. Mrs. Patterson slept under a thin cotton blanket, recovering from routine gallbladder surgery. Her breathing was steady, her vitals were stable. Everything was exactly as it should be. Kate adjusted the blanket anyway, smoothed it once, twice, then stepped back into the shadows by the window. Invisible. That was the goal. Had been for years now. Blend into the background, speak only when spoken to. Move through the hospital corridors like a ghost no one quite noticed. Nurse Brennan. Competent, reliable, forgettable. She'd perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. The afternoon shift at Memorial Hospital in Austin, Texas, moved with predictable rhythm. Medication rounds at 2, shift change at 3. Dr. Garrison making his rounds at 4, white coat crisp, voice carrying authority down every hallway he walked. Chief of trauma surgery. Brilliant, respected, and absolutely certain of his place in the hierarchy of this building. Kate had learned to read the rhythm like a sailor reading tides. She knew when to be visible and when to fade, when to speak and when silence served better. The other nurses thought she was shy. The doctors barely thought of her at all. Exactly as planned. Her pager buzzed. A single word. Trauma. Kate's pulse didn't change. Years of practice had taught her that much control. But something colder slid into place behind her ribs. The old instinct. The one she'd spent 1,000 days trying to bury. She secured Mrs. Patterson's IV one final time, checked the monitor, made a notation on the chart, then stepped into the hallway with movements so practiced they looked effortless. That was when the air changed. Hospitals had rhythms, but they also had warning signs. Kate felt it the way animals feel earthquakes before the ground starts shaking. This wasn't the controlled chaos of a motorcycle accident. This wasn't the frantic energy of a heart attack victim. This was different. Men in dark jackets moved through the corridor, not running, but moving with purpose that suggested military training. Security appeared in places they normally wouldn't. Someone murmured into an earpiece. The words were too quiet to hear, but Kate caught 2 of them. Secure, confirm. Her footsteps slowed by half a second, just enough to observe without seeming to observe. Her expression remained neutral, but her mind was already cataloging details. 3 men in civilian clothes with military bearing, 2 hospital security officers positioned at intersections, a 4th man standing near the trauma bay entrance, hand near his waistband where a weapon might rest. Not civilian. Kate reached the trauma bay doors just as they swung open. The smell hit first. Iron and antiseptic. But underneath, something sharper. Blood that had soaked through field dressings hours ago. Not fresh hospital gauze. Field wrap, the kind applied under fire. The patient lay on the gurney, chest rising in shallow movements. His skin was pale beneath streaks of red and brown. Dried blood, dust. The residue of something that had exploded close enough to mark him, but not close enough to kill him outright. His eyes were open, alert, tracking everything despite the pain that had to be carving through his body like molten wire. Navy SEAL. Kate didn't need to see the partial trident on his tactical vest. Didn't need to read the insignia. She recognized the stillness. The way his jaw stayed clenched against agony. The way his eyes cataloged every person in the room, assessing threats, calculating odds, even while bleeding. Her stomach tightened. Not fear, recognition. Dr. Garrison swept into the room, already issuing commands before he'd fully assessed the patient. That was his way. Decide fast, act faster. It had saved lives. It had also cost them. Multiple penetrating wounds, he announced, eyes scanning the visible injuries. Probable internal bleeding. Get imaging ready. Someone page radiology. Kate stepped closer. Professional distance, hands clasped, face neutral. Just another nurse ready to follow orders. Then the patient turned his head, his eyes locked onto hers. Relief flickered across his face so fast that no one else caught it. But Kate saw it, felt it land in her chest like a punch. "Kate," he whispered. The room didn't stop. The monitors kept beeping. The residents kept moving. Dr. Garrison kept talking. But Kate's world narrowed to a single point. This man, this voice, this name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. "Thank God you're here," the patient said. His voice was hoarse, rough with pain and dehydration and something deeper. "I need you." Dr. Garrison looked up sharply. His eyes moved from the patient to Kate and back again. Confusion crossed his face first, then irritation. "Sir, you need to stay still," Garrison said. The authority in his voice could have commanded armies. "Nurse Brennan will assist me. I'm the trauma surgeon here." The patient shook his head, a small movement, but definitive. "No," he said, "not her as a nurse. I need Dr. Brennan." Silence crashed into the room like a physical force. Kate felt every gaze turned toward her. The residents staring, a medical tech frozen mid-motion. Dr. Garrison's eyes narrowing with something between confusion and territorial challenge. "Sir," Garrison said slowly, each word measured, "I think the blood loss has you confused. This is Nurse Brennan. I am the trauma surgeon who will be handling your case." The patient's fingers curled into the sheet, white knuckles, tendons standing out. He turned his head again, eyes finding Kate's face, holding there. "Kate," he said again, "it's Marcus Hartwell, Helmand Province, 2022. You saved my entire team when that school collapsed on us." Kate's breath stopped in her throat. Helmand Province, 4 years ago, before Kandahar, before everything burned down. The memories came rushing back. Unbidden, unwanted. The school building reduced to rubble. 8 SEALs trapped beneath concrete and rebar. A triage situation that should have killed half of them. But Kate had worked for 17 hours straight, operating in conditions that made field hospitals look luxurious. She'd saved all 8. "You remember," Marcus whispered. "I can see it in your eyes." Dr. Garrison stepped forward. His posture had changed, less certain now, more wary. "Nurse Brennan, what is this patient talking about?" Kate opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Years of silence. Carefully constructed invisibility, all of it cracking like ice over deep water. "Doctor," Marcus said, his voice gaining strength despite the pain. "You don't understand. She's not just a nurse. She was a Navy trauma surgeon. One of the best I ever saw." The words hung in the air. Dr. Garrison stared at Kate, really looked at her for what might have been the first time since she'd started working at Memorial. The quiet nurse who never spoke up, never questioned orders, never drew attention. "Is this true?" Garrison asked. Kate's jaw tightened. She could feel her carefully built walls crumbling, could feel the weight of all those buried years pressing against the back of her throat. "Yes," she said quietly. One word, but it changed everything. Garrison's expression shifted, confusion giving way to something harder. "You've been working here as a nurse for years. You never mentioned you had surgical training. You never—" "Doctor," Marcus interrupted, his voice urgent now. "We don't have time for this. Those aren't motorcycle injuries. This is an IED pattern. Training accident, Afghanistan, 3 weeks ago." The word landed like a grenade. Afghanistan. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. The place where her career had died, where her reputation had been destroyed, where everything she'd built had turned to ash. "IED," Garrison repeated, focusing back on the patient. "You're military." "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hartwell," Marcus said. "Navy SEAL. And I'm telling you right now, if she doesn't operate on me, I'm going to die on this table." Kate forced herself to step closer. Professional training overriding panic. Her eyes scanned the visible wounds, the angles, the patterns. Muscle memory kicked in before conscious thought could stop it. Multiple entry points, irregular spacing, the distinctive pattern of a pressure-activated explosive device. Not shrapnel from a standard blast, something more sophisticated. Fragments that tumbled and spun rather than traveling in straight lines. "There are metal pieces near your heart," she said. Her voice was steady despite everything. "3 of them, maybe 4. The largest one is acting like a brace. If they move you wrong, if they position you flat for standard imaging, gravity shifts the fragments. They puncture the cardiac wall." Silence. Garrison stared at her. "You can't possibly know that from visual assessment." "Russian-made IED," Kate continued, eyes never leaving Marcus. "The fragments are designed with irregular edges. They cause maximum internal damage. Delayed kill mechanism." Marcus nodded weakly. "She's exactly right." "How could you possibly?" Garrison started. "Because I've seen this exact injury pattern," Kate said. "Because I've operated on it. Because I know what happens if you follow standard trauma protocol." The monitor started beeping faster, Marcus's blood pressure dropping, his breathing becoming more labored. "We need to move now," a resident said nervously. Garrison held up a hand. His eyes were still locked on Kate, reassessing, recalculating, a surgeon's mind working through impossible information. "You've performed surgery on IED victims," he said. "Yes." "Under combat conditions?" "Yes." "And you're certain about the fragment positions?" Kate met his gaze, held it. "I'm certain that if you send him to imaging, he won't survive the trip." The room held its breath. Garrison looked from Kate to Marcus, from the monitors to the visible wounds, the chief of trauma surgery, facing a decision that violated every protocol he'd spent 40 years following. Trust the credentials, trust the hierarchy, trust the system, or trust the quiet nurse who just revealed she was something else entirely. The monitor alarm screamed. "He's crashing!" someone shouted. Marcus's eyes rolled back. His body went rigid. The heart monitor flatlined into a single, sustained note that cut through the room like a scream. Kate moved before thought could interfere. Her hands were already on Marcus's chest, fingers finding the exact position. Not the standard CPR placement, something different. Adjusted for the internal injuries she couldn't see but knew were there. "Start compressions," she said, then caught herself. "Doctor, should we?" But Garrison was already watching her hands, watching the precision, the confidence, the way her shoulders stayed relaxed even as her arms worked. This wasn't panic, this was muscle memory. Years of training compressed into movements so practiced they looked effortless. "Continue," Garrison said quietly. Kate's hands moved in a rhythm that wasn't quite standard, faster by a fraction, deeper on the left side than the right, compensating for injuries no scan had revealed yet. "Epi," a resident said, reaching for the crash cart. "Wait," Kate said, then stopped herself again, looked at Garrison. He was studying her face now. The certainty there, the calm. He'd seen hundreds of medical professionals under pressure. He knew the difference between someone guessing and someone who knew. "How long?" he asked. 5 seconds, Kate said. "That's not protocol." "No," she agreed. "It's not." Garrison didn't look away. "Do it your way." 5 seconds. 4. 3. Kate's compressions stayed steady, consistent. The monitor flickered. Once, twice. Then it caught. A weak rhythm crawling across the screen. The room exhaled. Kate stepped back slowly. Her hands were steady, but inside something was shaking. The old instincts flooding back. The battlefield surgeon she'd buried rising from the grave. Garrison moved to the monitor, checked the readings, then turned back to Kate with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That wasn't standard CPR," he said. "No." You adjusted for suspected internal positioning. Yes. Without imaging, without confirmation. Kate nodded. Garrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Less challenged, more curious. Operating room 3, he said. Prep for immediate surgery. He paused. Your lead, Dr. Brennan. The words landed like a bomb. The residents stared. The nurses looked confused. Kate felt the weight of those 2 words settling onto shoulders that hadn't carried that responsibility in years. Doctor, she started. You know this injury pattern, Garrison said. It wasn't a question. You've operated on it successfully, and you just demonstrated assessment skills I haven't seen in 40 years of trauma surgery. He moved closer, lowered his voice slightly. I don't know why you're working as a nurse instead of a surgeon. I don't know what happened to send you here, but right now that man on the table needs someone who's seen what you've seen. So I'm asking you, will you operate? Kate looked at Marcus, at the monitors showing his fragile stability, at the wounds she recognized from a war most people tried to forget. Years of hiding, years of safety, years of believing she could outrun her past by pretending to be someone smaller. Yes, she said. They moved Marcus to OR3 with a precision that looked choreographed. Kate positioned the gurney herself. Small adjustments that made no sense to the residents, but made perfect sense to someone who understood how fragments shifted with angle and gravity. Marcus's eyes fluttered open as they prepared to transfer him. His hand found Kate's wrist. Weak grip, but deliberate. Kate, he whispered. Save your strength, she said. I didn't come here by accident. His words were slurred but insistent. Been looking for you. Years. Kate's chest tightened. Marcus, not now. Brought something, for you. His eyes were unfocused but determined. The truth about Kandahar. The name froze her in place. What? Files, Marcus said. Classified. Took me years to get clearance. His grip tightened slightly. They lied about you, Kate. They lied about all of it. Kate's heart hammered. What are you talking about? Later, Marcus said, his eyes starting to close. First you saved my life. Again, then I save yours. He slipped back into unconsciousness before she could respond. Dr. Garrison appeared at her shoulder. What did he say? Kate stared at Marcus's pale face, at the rise and fall of his chest, at the evidence of violence written across his body. He said he has something to tell me, she said quietly, after the surgery. Then I suggest we make sure he survives to tell you. They scrubbed in side by side. Kate's hands moved through the familiar ritual. Soap, water, the sterile brush against skin. Each motion precise. Each second counted. Garrison watched her from the next sink. How long were you a surgeon? 8 years. Navy? Yes. Combat zones? Kate nodded. Kandahar? She hesitated, then nodded again. Garrison was quiet for a moment, water running over his hands, steam rising around them. I lost someone in Kandahar, he said finally. My younger brother. Different unit, different operation, but same place, same war. Kate looked at him, saw something in his expression she hadn't noticed before. Old grief, the kind that never fully healed. I'm sorry, she said. For 18 years I've been angry, Garrison continued, at the military, at the command structure, at the field surgeons who I thought didn't do enough. He turned off the water, met her eyes. I might have been angry at the wrong people. You don't know what happened, Kate said quietly. No, Garrison agreed, but I know what I just saw in that trauma bay. And I know when someone moves like you do, they've earned that skill under conditions I can't imagine. He paused. Show me, teach me, help me understand what you learned over there. Kate felt something crack inside, not breaking, opening. Okay, she said. The operating room was ready, lights harsh and unforgiving, instruments laid out with geometric precision. Marcus on the table, draped, prepped, his chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance now. Kate stood at the table, scalpel in hand, the weight familiar, the balance perfect. She looked at the surgical field, at the wounds that would kill Marcus if handled wrong, at the fragments invisible to everyone but her. Behind her, Dr. Garrison stood ready, not leading, supporting, watching a surgeon he dismissed as a nurse step back into a role she'd abandoned. "Whenever you're ready, Dr. Brennan," he said quietly. Kate inhaled, exhaled, felt the old calm settle over her like armor. Then she began. The first incision was clean, precise, no wasted motion. The blade moved with confidence earned through hundreds of surgeries performed in places where hesitation meant death. "Retractor," she said. It appeared in her hand instantly. She worked methodically, exposing the surgical field with an efficiency that made the room go quiet. The residents leaned closer. One of them whispered something to another. Kate didn't hear it, didn't need to. She was operating in a different space now, a place where time moved differently and everything outside the sterile field ceased to exist. "There," she said, pointing without touching. "First fragment. See the angle?" Garrison looked, frowned. "It's positioned against the intercostal muscle." "Acting as a brace," Kate confirmed. "Remove the others first. This one collapses the whole structure." "That's counterintuitive. That's battlefield mechanics." She reached for the smallest fragment, the one that looked least dangerous. Her movements were delicate, surgical forceps holding metal that had been designed to kill, extracting it from flesh that had somehow survived. It came free, a piece of jagged metal no bigger than a grain of rice, but positioned perfectly to have caused massive hemorrhage if shifted wrong. Kate placed it in the specimen tray, moved to the second fragment. This one was larger, irregular shape, resting near the lung lining with an edge sharp enough to puncture with the slightest pressure. She adjusted her angle, compensated for Marcus's breathing even though he was intubated. Her hands moved with a certainty that came from having done this exact procedure in conditions far worse than this pristine operating room. The fragment slid free. "Beautiful," Garrison murmured. Kate didn't respond. She was already focused on the third fragment, the dangerous one, the piece that had been pressing against Marcus's heart wall with every beat, the one that would kill him if she got this wrong. "Suction," she said. The field cleared. She could see it now, nestled against tissue that looked fragile as wet paper. One wrong move, one slip, one moment of doubt. But Kate's hands didn't shake. Years of training compressed into this moment. Helmand Province, operating in a half-collapsed building while gunfire echoed above, saving 8 men who should have died. Kandahar, choices made under impossible conditions, lives saved that no one seemed to remember when counting the ones lost. Years of hiding, of pretending to be less than she was, of believing that being invisible was the same as being safe. Her fingers closed around the fragment. One breath, two, then she extracted it. Smooth, controlled, perfect. The monitor held steady. Marcus's heart kept beating. Kate released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "All fragments removed," she announced, "beginning closure." The sutures went in with the same precision, each one placed exactly where it needed to be. Kate worked in silence, aware of Garrison watching every movement, learning, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the quiet nurse named Brennan. 30 minutes later, she stepped back from the table. "Surgery complete," she said quietly. The room seemed to exhale with her. Garrison moved to check her work. His eyes scanned the surgical field, the placement of sutures, the care taken with every layer of tissue. "Flawless," he said. "Absolutely flawless." Kate removed her gloves. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear, from the release of adrenaline that had kept them steady through the entire procedure. "Get him to recovery," Garrison ordered. "I want full monitoring. Any change in vitals I want to know immediately." As they wheeled Marcus out, Garrison turned to Kate. They stood alone in the OR, just the two of them, and the lingering smell of antiseptic and blood. "Why?" he asked simply. Kate knew what he was asking. Why hide? Why pretend to be a nurse? Why bury that level of skill under years of invisibility? "Because I needed to disappear," she said. "From what?" Kate looked at the empty operating table, at the blood-stained drapes, at the evidence of violence and survival. "From Kandahar," she said. "From what happened there. From who I was." Garrison nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I need to find out what Marcus came here to tell me." They found Marcus in recovery 2 hours later. He was awake, groggy, but conscious. His eyes found Kate's face the moment she entered the room. "You did it," he said, voice rough from intubation. "You're alive," Kate replied. "That's what matters." "No." Marcus's hand moved weakly toward the bedside table. "What matters is in that folder." Kate saw it then, a manila envelope, thick, sealed with official-looking tape, marked with stamps she recognized from her Navy days. Classified. Operation Iron Shield, Kandahar Province. Her blood went cold. Garrison stood in the doorway, watching, silent, giving her space for whatever this was. "I've spent years getting clearance for those files," Marcus said. "Years fighting through bureaucracy and classified protocols." He looked at her with an intensity that cut through the medication haze. "I didn't come here because I needed a surgeon, Kate. I came here because you need to know the truth." Kate's hand trembled as she reached for the folder. "What truth?" she whispered. "About what really happened that day," Marcus said. "About why the intelligence was wrong. About who made the decisions that sent you into that school." He paused. "About the lies they told to cover their own failures." Kate's fingers touched the envelope. Cool, heavy, full of secrets she'd spent years trying not to think about. "They blamed you," Marcus continued. "They made you the scapegoat, but you were never the problem, Kate. You were the only thing that went right that day." The envelope felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Behind her, Garrison spoke quietly. "Do you want privacy?" Kate shook her head. Whatever was in these files, whatever truth Marcus had risked his life to bring her, she was done hiding from it. She broke the seal, opened the folder. The first page was a mission briefing, dated 48 hours before the Kandahar school bombing. She scanned the text. Official military documentation, intelligence reports, threat assessments. Then she saw it. A single line buried in the middle of the page. Credible threat. Kandahar school compound. Explosive device. Estimated casualty count, 40 to 60 civilians. The page slipped from her fingers. "They knew," she whispered. Marcus nodded grimly. "They knew. 48 hours before you were sent in, they had intelligence, specific intelligence, and they sent medical teams in anyway." Kate's knees felt weak. She grabbed the edge of the bed. "Why?" "Keep reading," Marcus said. She did. Page after page. Intelligence reports that were never shared with field teams. Risk assessments that recommended evacuation. Command decisions that ignored every warning. And then, near the end, she found the casualty report. Total casualties, 47. Total saved, 45. Fatalities, 2. Both fatalities listed as critical condition upon arrival. Both assessed as non-survivable regardless of intervention. She'd saved 45 people out of 47, under conditions that should have killed most of them, and they'd called it a failure. They'd blamed her for deaths that were inevitable, for losses that happened before she ever touched those children. Kate's vision blurred, not from tears, from rage. Years of guilt that had been built on lies. "The inquiry," she said, her voice shaking. "The investigation. They knew this and they needed someone to blame," Marcus said. "Higher command made bad calls, ignored intelligence, sent medical teams into a trap. People died, and rather than admit their mistakes, they blamed the surgeon who did everything possible to save lives. Garrison stepped closer. His face had gone pale. "May I?" Kate handed him the folder with numb fingers. He read in silence. She watched his expression change, confusion turning to anger, anger turning to something darker. "This is unconscionable," he said finally. "They destroyed your career to protect their own." "They destroyed more than my career," Kate said quietly. "They destroyed who I was." Marcus reached for her hand. His grip was weak but steady. "I'm sorry it took so long. I tried earlier, but the classification level, I had to go through channels I didn't even know existed." Kate looked at him, at this man who'd spent years fighting bureaucracy just to bring her the truth, who'd gotten himself blown up and still made sure to bring these files to her. "Why?" she asked. "Why go through all this for me?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Because you saved my life twice, once in Helmand, once today. And because I was there, Kate, I saw what you did in Kandahar. I saw you work for 18 straight hours trying to save those kids. I saw you make impossible choices with grace and skill I've never witnessed before or since." His eyes held hers. "You deserve better than what they did to you." The room was quiet except for the soft beep of monitors. Garrison cleared his throat. "Dr. Brennan, Kate." He waited until she looked at him. "I owe you an apology. For years you've worked in this hospital, and I never saw you, never recognized what you were capable of. I let you hide because it was easier than questioning why someone with your skills was working as a nurse." "I wanted to hide," Kate said. "Maybe," Garrison allowed, "but you shouldn't have had to." Kate looked down at Marcus, at the man who'd brought her truth, at Garrison who was offering something like understanding, at the folder that proved her guilt had been manufactured. Years of carrying weight that was never hers to carry. Years of believing she'd failed. Years of being invisible because she thought she deserved to disappear. And now, standing in this recovery room, holding proof that she'd been lied to, she felt something shift. Not healing, not yet, but the first crack in the wall she'd built around herself. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Marcus squeezed her hand. "Now you stop hiding. Now you remember who you are. Now you show them what they threw away when they tried to bury you." Garrison nodded. "And now you help me understand what you learned in places I've never been. Help me build something here that honors what you survived." Kate looked at both of them. The SEAL commander who'd fought through classified bureaucracy to vindicate her. The trauma chief who was offering her a second chance. The surgeries she just performed flashed through her mind, the way her hands had remembered, the way the old skills had risen up despite years of suppression. Maybe you couldn't run from who you were. Maybe invisibility was just another kind of prison. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Outside the window, the Texas sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The kind of sunset that marked endings, but also beginnings. Kate Brennan stood in the recovery room, holding classified files that proved her innocence, flanked by two men who believed in her worth, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like a surgeon. And that, she was beginning to remember, was exactly who she'd always been. The classified folder sat on the break room table like unexploded ordnance. Kate stared at it over cold coffee she'd forgotten to drink. 3 in the morning. The hospital quiet except for the soft rhythm of machines keeping people alive in rooms she couldn't see. She'd been reading for 6 hours, going through every page, every report, every lie documented in official language that made betrayal sound like policy. Operation Iron Shield, Kandahar Province, March 15, 2023. Intelligence received, 1400 hours, March 13th, 48 hours before the bombing. Credible threat assessment. Explosive device confirmed. Target, civilian school compound. Estimated casualties, critical. Recommendation, immediate evacuation. Decision, Proceed with scheduled medical outreach. Risk assessment deemed acceptable. Kate's hands had stopped shaking somewhere around page 12. Now they just felt numb. Acceptable risk. That's what they'd called it. Sending medical teams into a compound they knew was targeted. Because the optics were good. Because the mission timeline was set. Because admitting they had intelligence would mean admitting they'd failed to act on it earlier. 47 people had paid for that acceptable risk. 45 of them had survived. Because of her. 2 hadn't. Because no one could have saved them. But someone needed to be blamed. Someone whose career could be sacrificed to protect the chain of command that had made the real mistakes. Dr. Catherine Brennan, Navy trauma surgeon, 8 years of exemplary service, hundreds of lives saved. Scapegoat. The break room door opened. Kate didn't look up. She knew those footsteps now, measured, certain. The walk of a man who'd spent 40 years being the authority in every room he entered. Dr. Garrison sat down across from her. He didn't speak immediately, just sat. 2 surgeons in the pre-dawn darkness, the weight of revealed truth hanging between them. "You should go home," he said finally. "Get some sleep." "Can't sleep." "Then at least eat something." Kate shook her head. Food felt impossible. Everything felt impossible except sitting here, staring at documentation that proved she'd spent years hating herself for someone else's sins. Garrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. The chief of surgery stripped away, leaving just a man. "My brother's name was David," he said. "He was 32 when he died. Marine, second deployment to Kandahar, August 2008. Kate looked up. Garrison was staring at his own hands. Old hands. Skilled hands. Hands that had saved thousands of lives, but couldn't save the one that mattered most. IED, he continued, took out his entire convoy. He died before they could get him to the field hospital. Garrison's jaw tightened. For 18 years, I've carried anger about that. About the medics who I thought didn't do enough. About the surgeons who I thought gave up too fast. About a system that I believe failed him. He finally met her eyes. I was wrong, he said. I've been angry at ghosts, at shadows, at people who probably did everything humanly possible and still lost because war doesn't care about effort or skill or intention. He paused. I'm sorry, Kate, for 18 years of misplaced blame and for years of not seeing you clearly because I was too blinded by my own unresolved grief. Kate felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, opening. You couldn't have known, she said quietly. No, Garrison agreed, but I should have asked. Should have wondered why a nurse moved like a surgeon. Should have questioned why someone with your obvious skill was content to stay invisible. He leaned forward slightly. I'm asking now, not as your superior, as someone who understands what it means to carry weight that isn't yours. Kate looked back at the folder, at the proof of her innocence documented in cold military bureaucracy. I thought if I disappeared, the guilt would disappear too, she said. If I became small enough, quiet enough, maybe I could stop seeing their faces every time I closed my eyes. Did it work? No. Garrison nodded slowly. Guilt doesn't shrink. It just fills whatever space you give it. They sat in silence. Outside the window, Austin was still dark. But there was that quality to the air that said dawn was coming. The world preparing for morning, whether anyone was ready or not. There's a case coming in this afternoon, Garrison said. Marine Sergeant. IED injuries from a training exercise gone wrong. Complex fragmentation pattern, similar to what you dealt with yesterday. Kate's pulse quickened despite exhaustion. You want me to assist? No, Garrison said. I want you to lead. I want you to show me what you learned in places I've never been. Teach me. Help me understand. Kate stared at him, the chief of trauma surgery, 40 years of experience, asking her to teach him. Why? She asked. Because you have knowledge this hospital needs, Garrison said simply. Because soldiers keep coming home with injuries our civilian protocols weren't designed to handle. And because someone with your skills shouldn't be hiding behind a nursing station when she could be saving lives no one else can save. The old fear rose up, the instinct to retreat, to refuse, to stay small and safe. Then Kate thought about Marcus Hartwell, about years spent tracking down classified files just to prove her innocence, about the trust in his eyes when he'd asked her to operate, about the 45 people she'd saved in Kandahar, the ones who lived because she'd made impossible choices under impossible conditions. "Okay," she said, "I'll lead." Garrison smiled, just slightly, just enough. "Good," he said. "Surgery's at 1400 hours. I'll scrub in with you, learn everything you're willing to teach." The Marine sergeant arrived right on schedule. Staff Sergeant Luis Rodriguez, 28 years old, 3 deployments. Injuries from a training accident that shouldn't have happened but did, because war machines don't distinguish between practice and reality. Kate reviewed his scans in the prep room. Garrison stood beside her, studying the images with the focus of a man who'd spent decades reading the body's secrets in black and white film. "4 major fragments," Kate said, pointing. "See the distribution pattern?" "Irregular spacing," Garrison observed, "not the typical blast radius." Training IEDs use lower-grade explosives, but the fragmentation mechanics are identical to combat devices. The pieces tumble instead of traveling straight, creates internal damage that imaging doesn't always catch. Garrison leaned closer. "You're saying there's more we can't see?" "Always is with these injuries. The scans show the obvious fragments, but there are micro pieces, debris, tissue damage that won't show up until we're inside." "How do you know where to look?" Kate traced a pattern on the screen with one finger. "You follow the pressure wave. The blast creates a cavity, temporary, but it leaves traces. Tissue that looks normal but isn't. Capillary damage, subtle hemorrhaging. You learn to read the negative space." Garrison's eyes followed her finger, understanding dawning. "You're not just reading the injury, you're reading the story of how it happened." "Every wound tells you what created it," Kate said, "if you know how to listen." They scrubbed in together, side by side, the ritual of soap and water in preparation. Kate felt different this time, not hiding, not pretending, just being what she was. A surgeon, teaching another surgeon, passing knowledge earned in blood and fire. In the operating room, Rodriguez lay prepped and draped. His vitals were stable, his breathing mechanically assisted. Everything controlled and calm in a way battlefield surgery never was. Kate positioned herself at the table. Garrison stood across from her, not hovering, not commanding, just present, ready to learn. "Scalpel," she said. The instrument appeared in her hand. Familiar weight, perfect balance. She made the first incision with confidence that came from having done this hundreds of times in conditions far worse than this pristine OR. The blade moved cleanly through skin and fascia, exposing the surgical field with efficiency that made the assisting residents exchange glances. "First fragment," Kate said. "Right intercostal. See the angle?" Garrison nodded. "Embedded in the muscle wall." "Not embedded, braced. Remove it first and the pressure differential shifts. The other pieces move. One of them punctures the lung. So we leave it for last." "Exactly." Kate worked methodically, extracting fragments in an order that seemed counterintuitive until you understood the mechanics of how they'd gotten there. The first 2 came free without issue. Then she reached for the 3rd fragment. "Wait," Garrison said suddenly. "The angle." "I see it," Kate replied. The fragment had shifted. Millimeters, but enough to matter. The monitor alarm chirped. Not critical, but warning. "Pressure's dropping," a resident announced nervously. Kate's hand stayed steady. "Suction. Now." The field cleared. She could see it. The fragment had rotated, edge now facing the lung lining. One wrong move and it would puncture. Garrison watched, silent, trusting. Kate adjusted her approach, changed the angle of extraction. Slower this time, millimeter by millimeter. The fragment slid free. The alarm stopped. Vitals stabilizing, the anesthesiologist confirmed. Garrison exhaled slowly. That was remarkable. That was necessary, Kate said. Garrison asked quiet questions as they worked. Absorbed information like a man who'd never stopped being hungry to learn despite decades of expertise. You adjust for respiration, he observed, even though he's intubated. Muscle memory, Kate said. In the field, patients aren't always fully sedated. You learn to time your movements between breaths. And the angle of your wrist. You're compensating for something. Kate paused, looked at him across the table, saw genuine curiosity there. Respect. In combat surgery, you're not always in an optimal position, she explained. You operate from angles civilians would never use. Kneeling, prone, whatever position keeps you below the line of fire. Your body learns to adapt, to maintain precision regardless of posture. Remarkable, Garrison murmured. They worked in synchronized silence after that, Kate leading, Garrison assisting with hands that were still steady and skilled despite 62 years. The dynamics shifted subtly, not student and teacher, something more collaborative, more equal, something that felt like trust. The final fragment came free without complication. Kate closed with the same meticulous precision she'd opened with. Each suture placed exactly where it needed to be. Surgery complete, she announced. The room seemed to release tension it had been holding. The residents stepped back. The nurses began cleanup. Rodriguez's vitals stayed strong and stable. Garrison met her eyes across the table. That was extraordinary. That was necessary, Kate corrected, but she felt something warm in her chest. Pride, maybe, or just the satisfaction of work done well by someone who finally remembered how. They stripped off gloves in the scrub room, side by side again. The ritual of cleaning reversed. Thank you, Garrison said quietly, for trusting me enough to teach. Thank you for asking, Kate replied, for seeing past the nurse to the surgeon. I should have seen it sooner. Kate shook her head. I didn't want to be seen. You can't blame yourself for respecting boundaries I built. Garrison turned off the water, studied her face. What changed? Years of guilt cracking open. Marcus Hartwell bringing truth in a classified folder. The proof that she'd been scapegoated for command failures. I stopped believing I deserved to be invisible, she said. They walked back toward the recovery wing together. Not surgeon and nurse, not even mentor and student. Just two people who'd found unexpected understanding in a place neither had been looking for it. That's when Kate saw him. Standing in the hallway near the nurse's station, young, maybe early 30s, handsome in that clean-cut way military doctors often were. He wore a white coat marked with the hospital's logo, a visitor's badge clipped to his lapel. Dr. Nathaniel Whitmore. Kate stopped walking. The world narrowed to a point, to this man, to this face she'd seen across a hearing room years ago, speaking words that destroyed her career, her reputation, her life. Garrison felt her stillness. Kate, what's wrong? Whitmore turned, saw her. The color drained from his face like someone had opened a valve. Dr. Brennan, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kate's hands curled into fists at her sides. Not anger, something colder, more controlled. Dr. Whitmore, she replied, each syllable precise, sharp. Garrison looked between them, reading tension that crackled like electricity. Do you two know each other? Yes, Kate said. We served together, Whitmore added quickly. Kandahar, He stopped, swallowed hard. I didn't know you were here. Clearly. An uncomfortable silence fell. Other staff moved around them, the hospital continuing its rhythms. But in this small pocket of hallway, time felt suspended. I should go, Whitmore said, started to turn. Why are you here? Kate asked. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came before storms. Whitmore stopped. I've been transferred, starting next week. Trauma rotation. Here. Yes. At this hospital. Yes. Kate felt something hot and bitter rise in her throat. Years of distance, of carefully constructed safety. And now the man who'd helped destroy her was going to be working in the same building, walking the same halls, seeing her every day. I'll request reassignment, Whitmore said quickly. I didn't know you were here. I wouldn't have. I'll fix this. No, Kate said. The word came out harder than she intended. Don't run on my account. I've done enough running for both of us. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Guilt and shame warred across his face. Kate, Dr. Brennan, she corrected coldly. Dr. Brennan, he repeated. I need to talk to you. There are things you don't know, things I should have said years ago. Then you should have said them years ago. I couldn't. Whitmore glanced around, lowered his voice. Please, give me 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. Kate wanted to refuse, wanted to walk away, leave him standing there with whatever confession he thought would matter now. But Garrison's hand touched her elbow gently, a reminder, a question. She looked at him and saw quiet support there, not telling her what to do, just being present. Fine, Kate said. 5 minutes. They found an empty conference room. Kate stood with her back to the window, defensive posture. Whitmore sat at the table, hands folded, looking young and miserable, and nothing like the composed doctor who testified against her. Garrison stood near the door, silent guardian, making it clear without words that Kate wasn't alone in this. Say what you need to say, Kate told Whitmore. He took a shaky breath. I lied at the inquiry. I know. Not just about the surgery, about everything. The timeline, the resources, the conditions. Whitmore's hands clenched together. They coached me, told me what to say, what to emphasize, what to omit. Who's they? Command. 3 officers whose names I never learned. They told me if I didn't cooperate, my career was over before it started. I was 29, terrified. I just finished my residency. Everything I'd worked for was at stake. Kate's voice was ice. And my career? Was that at stake too? Yes, Whitmore met her eyes. Finally. And I convinced myself it was justified, that you'd made mistakes, that the command's version of events was accurate, that I was just clarifying what really happened. You lied, Kate said flatly. Call it whatever you want, but you lied. And 45 lives I saved disappeared behind 2 deaths that were already inevitable. I know. Do you? Kate stepped closer. Do you know what it's like to have your entire identity stripped away? To question every decision you've ever made? To carry guilt for deaths that weren't your fault because everyone keeps telling you they were? Whitmore's eyes were shining. I've regretted it every day since. Good, Kate said. You should. Silence fell, heavy, uncomfortable. Garrison finally spoke from his position near the door. Why come here, Dr. Whitmore? Why now? Whitmore looked at him, then back to Kate. Because 2 months ago, I was contacted by Navy investigators. They were reviewing the Kandahar operation, looking into command decisions. They showed me the intelligence reports that were withheld. His voice cracked slightly. They asked if I'd be willing to testify, to tell the truth this time. Kate's breath caught. What did you say? I said yes. I've already given a deposition, detailed everything, the coaching, the pressure, the lies I told. Whitmore stood slowly. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I can at least stop running from it. Kate stared at him. This man who'd helped destroy her, who'd spent years carrying his own guilt, who was finally trying to make amends. She wanted to hate him, wanted to hold on to anger like armor, but she was so tired of carrying weight, her own and everyone else's. 5 minutes are up, she said quietly. Whitmore nodded, moved toward the door, stopped beside her. I'm sorry, Kate, Dr. Brennan. I'm sorry for being a coward when you needed someone brave." He left. Kate stood motionless, processing, absorbing, trying to reconcile years of anger with this new information, that the man who'd wronged her was trying to make it right, that vindication was coming from unexpected places. Garrison approached carefully. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," Kate admitted. "I thought I knew how to feel about him. Now I'm not sure what I feel at all." "That's fair." Kate turned to face him. "Do you think people can change?" Garrison considered the question seriously. "I think people can grow, can recognize their mistakes. Whether that's the same as change," he shrugged. "Time will tell. But the fact that he's trying, that matters." "Does it matter enough?" "That's not for me to decide. That's between you and whatever peace you're looking for." Kate was about to respond when her pager went off. She glanced at it, then felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Emergency. Trauma bay. Critical incoming. Military transport. "What is it?" Garrison asked, seeing her expression change. Kate couldn't speak, could only stare at the pager, at the note that had been added to the standard trauma call. Patient name, Lieutenant Ethan Blackwood, Navy SEAL. Critical injuries from training accident. Ethan Blackwood. The name hit her like a physical blow, memories flooding back. Kandahar, the school, smoke and fire and children screaming. A young SEAL trapped under rubble. Injuries so severe Kate had made the impossible choice. To focus on those she could save. To leave him because his wounds were too extensive. She'd carried his death for years. The face she saw in nightmares. The life she believed she'd sacrificed. "Kate," Garrison said urgently, "what's wrong?" "He's dead," she whispered. "He died years ago. I was there. I made the choice to—" Her voice broke. "He can't be here." Garrison gripped her shoulders, firm but gentle. "The pager says he's incoming, critical but alive. If this is the same man, that means I was wrong." Kate looked up at him. "That means he survived. That means for years I've been carrying his death and he was alive." The pager went off again, more urgent. ETA 2 minutes. Kate's training kicked in before thought could interfere. She moved toward the trauma bay on autopilot. Garrison kept pace beside her, solid presence, grounding her when everything else felt like it was tilting sideways. The trauma team was already assembled when they arrived. Gurneys prepared, equipment ready, everyone waiting with the controlled tension of people who knew critical meant critical. Then the doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in, guiding a gurney with practiced efficiency. Kate saw tactical gear first, then blood, too much blood. Then she saw his face. Ethan Blackwood, older than she remembered, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there years ago, but unmistakably alive, unmistakably him. His eyes were open, unfocused but conscious. They swept the room, cataloging, assessing threats even while dying. Then they landed on Kate. Recognition flared, immediate, visceral. "Doc," he gasped. "Doc Brennan." Kate couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Years of guilt, years of nightmares, years of believing she'd left this man to die. And he was here, alive, looking at her like she was salvation instead of the person who'd abandoned him. "Ethan," she whispered. His hand moved weakly, reaching for her. I always knew you'd be here, when I needed you." The monitor screamed, multiple alarms, vitals crashing. Garrison snapped into action. "Get him to OR now. Kate, we need—" But Kate was already moving, hands on Blackwood's gurney, assessing injuries with eyes that had learned to read trauma in seconds. Multiple penetrating wounds, severe hemorrhaging, the kind of injuries that killed people who weren't extraordinarily lucky or impossibly strong. "He's not dying," she said. Her voice was steel. "Not today, not after surviving years of me thinking he was dead." They moved as one unit, down the hallway, into the elevator, up to the surgical floor. Kate never let go of the gurney, never took her eyes off Blackwood's face. He looked at her through pain-glazed eyes. "I never blamed you," he said, voice barely audible over the gurney wheels. "None of us did. We knew. What you did. Saving who you could. Making impossible choices." Tears blurred Kate's vision. "I thought I killed you." "You saved me." Blackwood's smile was weak but genuine. "Stabilized me enough for evac. They got me to Germany, 3 surgeries, but I made it. Because of you." The elevator doors opened. OR3, waiting. Team assembled. Everything ready. "Then let me save you again," Kate said. They prepped him fast. No time for full protocols. Just enough sedation to keep him still. Enough intervention to keep him alive. Kate stood at the table, scalpel in hand, Garrison beside her. The ghost she'd carried for years, breathing shallowly under surgical drapes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for thinking you died, for carrying that guilt." Blackwood's eyes fluttered. "Nothing to forgive, Doc. You did everything right." The monitors beeped. Steady rhythm. Fragile but holding. Kate looked at Garrison, saw understanding there, saw support, saw the father figure who'd emerged from the arrogant surgeon she'd first met. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Kate nodded. "Ready." She made the first incision as dawn broke over Austin. Light spilling through OR windows, painting everything in shades of gold. Years of shadows, years of guilt, years of believing she'd failed. And here, in this moment, with a man she'd thought dead breathing on her table, Kate Brennan finally understood. She hadn't failed at all. She'd survived. They'd both survived. And survival, she was learning, was its own kind of victory. The surgical field opened under Kate's blade like a battlefield revealing its secrets. Blood welled up, controlled by suction, exposing the damage that years ago she thought was unsurvivable. Ethan Blackwood's chest cavity told a story written in torn tissue and shattered bone. A story she'd read wrong the first time. Or had she? Garrison stood across from her, hands ready, eyes focused. "Talk me through what you're seeing." Years of training compressed into fluid movements as Kate's fingers worked with practiced efficiency, retracting tissue, exposing the full extent of injuries that should have killed this man. Multiple lacerations to the liver, partial pneumothorax, and there, she pointed without touching, splenic rupture, grade 4. "That's survivable now," Garrison observed. "But years ago, under field conditions, it wasn't," Kate finished. Her voice was steady, but something ached behind her ribs. "Not with the resources we had. Not with 47 other casualties. Not with—" The memory hit her before she could stop it. Kandahar, March 15th, 2023. The school compound reduced to rubble and fire. Bodies everywhere, some moving, some not. The triage decisions coming faster than thought. This one first, that one next. Him, she'd make time for him. And Ethan Blackwood, pinned under concrete, bleeding from wounds she could see, and probably a dozen she couldn't. His eyes open, conscious, looking at her with trust that felt like accusation. "Doc," he'd said, "how bad?" She'd knelt beside him, done a rapid assessment with hands that were already covered in other people's blood, felt his abdomen, rigid, distended, internal bleeding, severe. "Bad," she'd told him honestly, "but I'm going to stabilize you." "There are kids," Blackwood had whispered. "I can hear them. In the West Wing." Kate had looked up, toward the sound of crying, young voices, terrified, trapped. 47 people, one surgeon. Choices that would haunt her regardless of what she decided. "I'll come back," she'd promised Blackwood. "I'm going to get the kids first. Then I'm coming back for you. Understand?" He'd nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying, that she was leaving him, that he might die while she saved others, that this was battlefield mathematics and he was the variable she had to set aside. "Go," he'd said. "Save them." She had. She'd run toward the crying, toward the children trapped in the collapsed West Wing. She'd work for hours, pulling bodies from rubble, performing field surgery on a floor covered in glass, in blood, in broken concrete, saving lives one impossible decision at a time. When she'd finally made it back to where Blackwood had been pinned, he was gone. Evacuated, someone had told her. Died en route, someone else said. She'd been too exhausted to confirm, too destroyed by choices she'd had to make, too broken by the mathematics of triage that said some people lived because others died. For years, she'd carried the weight of that choice, the certainty that she'd left Ethan Blackwood to die while she saved others. Kate, Garrison's voice cut through the memory. Stay with me. I need you here. Kate blinked, focused. The OR swam back into clarity. Not Kandahar, not years ago, here, now. A chance to rewrite history she thought was written in stone. I'm here, she said. His pressure is dropping, the anesthesiologist warned. Kate's hands moved faster, suturing the liver laceration, packing the wound, stopping bleeding that wanted to become hemorrhage. Her movements were precise, controlled, but underneath something was screaming. I thought you died. I've been carrying your death like a stone in my chest. And you were alive. Alive and healing, and I didn't know. Suction, she said. The field cleared. She could see the spleen now, ruptured, bleeding, salvageable if she moved fast enough. Garrison anticipated her next move. Splenectomy? Partial, Kate corrected. He's young, active duty. He needs whatever function we can preserve. That's delicate work. Yes. She began the repair, careful cuts, precise sutures, saving what could be saved. The kind of surgery that required absolute focus, absolute stillness. The kind she'd performed dozens of times in places where one wrong move meant death. Her hands remembered, even when her mind wanted to fracture, even when memories kept trying to drag her back to Kandahar, her hands knew what to do. Beautiful work, Garrison murmured, watching her, learning, seeing skills that had been forged in fire. Kate finished the splenic repair, moved to the lung. The pneumothorax wasn't severe, but it needed addressing. Chest tube placement, reinflation, making sure Blackwood could breathe without mechanical assistance once he woke, when he woke. Vitals stabilizing, the anesthesiologist announced. Relief flickered through the room. Residents who'd been holding tension in their shoulders relaxed slightly. Nurses exchanged glances. Everyone feeling what Kate was feeling. This man was going to make it. Closing now, Kate said. The sutures went in like a prayer. Each one a promise. Each one a refusal to let years of guilt define her anymore. She'd made the right choice in Kandahar. She'd saved 45 people. And Blackwood had survived because she'd stabilized him enough for evacuation, because she'd done everything possible in impossible conditions. The guilt hadn't been hers to carry. 20 minutes later, Kate stepped back from the table. Surgery complete. The room exhaled. Collective release of breath held too long. Garrison met her eyes across Blackwood's closed chest. That was extraordinary. That was necessary, Kate said. But this time she let herself feel the pride underneath. The satisfaction of work done well, of skills used to their fullest, of being exactly who she was meant to be. They wheeled Blackwood to recovery. Kate walked alongside the gurney, hand resting lightly on the rail, connected to this man whose survival she'd doubted, whose ghost she'd carried. In the recovery bay, machines beeped steady rhythms. Proof of life. Proof of choices made right. Kate pulled a chair close to Blackwood's bed, sat, waited. Garrison stood in the doorway, silent support, giving her space but staying close enough to matter. 30 minutes passed. Then Blackwood's eyes fluttered open. He looked around slowly, orienting, the instinct of someone who'd woken in too many strange places, always assessing threats, always calculating escape routes. Then his gaze found Kate. "Doc," he said, Voice rough from intubation but clear. "You're still here." "Where else would I be?" Blackwood smiled faintly. "Years ago, I woke up in Germany. Asked about you. They told me you'd been blamed for Kandahar. Told me you'd disappeared." His hand moved weakly toward hers. "I've been looking for you ever since." Kate's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you saved my life. And I needed you to know that. Needed you to know we all understood. What you did that day, the choices you made, we knew." "I left you," Kate whispered. "I made a decision that—" "You made the right decision," Blackwood interrupted. His grip on her hands strengthened slightly. "There were kids trapped, dying. You couldn't save everyone, so you saved who you could." He paused. "That's not failure, Doc. That's heroism." Kate felt tears burn behind her eyes. "I thought you died." "I almost did, but you stabilized me first. Enough for evac. Enough for the surgeons in Germany to have something to work with." Blackwood's eyes were serious, certain. "You gave me a chance, and I took it. We both survived that day, just in different ways." Garrison stepped closer. "Lieutenant Blackwood, I'm Dr. Garrison, Chief of Surgery here." Blackwood nodded slightly. "Sir, I have a question if you're up for it." "Yes, sir." "The other SEALs who were with Dr. Brennan in Kandahar, do you know what happened to them?" Blackwood's smile grew. "All alive. All stateside now. Some retired, some still active. But all of us, every single one, we remember what she did, how she worked, what she sacrificed." Kate stared at him. "All of them?" "Every one. Marcus Hartwell sent word when he tracked you down. There's a network, Doc. Guys who served with you, who you saved. We all wanted you to know the truth, that we never blamed you, that we knew you were a hero even when they were calling you something else." The weight Kate had carried for years began to crack. Not breaking, dissolving, releasing its hold on her chest. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "You should have," Blackwood replied. "We failed you there, but we're here now, and we're not letting anyone forget what you really are." Kate opened her mouth to respond when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Measured, military, the sound of authority approaching with purpose. A woman appeared in the doorway, Navy uniform, captain's insignia, 40-something with sharp eyes and bearing that suggested she'd earned every bit of rank she wore. "Dr. Catherine Brennan?" the woman said. Kate stood slowly. "Yes. Captain Victoria Hayes, Naval Medical Operations." Hayes stepped into the room. Her gaze swept over Kate, Garrison, Blackwood, assessing the scene with trained efficiency. "I've been looking for you for 2 days. Colonel Hartwell suggested I might find you here." Kate felt her stomach tighten. "Why are you looking for me?" Hayes reached into her briefcase, pulled out a folder, official Navy SEAL. Multiple stamps suggesting clearances and reviews and bureaucratic processes Kate remembered too well. Because 3 months ago, the Naval Inspector General completed an investigation into Operation Iron Shield, the Kandahar school bombing. Hayes opened the folder. "The findings have been declassified, and I've been authorized to deliver them to you personally." The room went very quiet. Hayes began reading. Her voice was formal, but not unkind. "After extensive review of classified intelligence reports, mission parameters and testimony from 14 witnesses, including Lieutenant Colonel Hartwell and Dr. Nathaniel Whitmore, the investigation concludes the following." Kate's hands clenched at her sides. "Intelligence regarding the school bombing was received 48 hours prior to the mission and deliberately withheld from medical teams. The decision to proceed despite known threats violated protocol and directly contributed to casualty rates. Dr. Catherine Brennan performed beyond all reasonable standards under impossible conditions. Of 47 casualties, Dr. Brennan successfully treated 45. The 2 fatalities were assessed as non-survivable, regardless of intervention." Hayes looked up from the document, met Kate's eyes. Dr. Brennan, the Navy formally acknowledges that you were wrongly blamed for command failures that were not your responsibility. 3 officers have been court-martialed, others have been reprimanded, and your service record has been amended to reflect the truth of what happened that day. Kate couldn't speak, couldn't move. Years of guilt, years of shame, erased by official words read in a hospital recovery room. Additionally, Hayes continued, I'm authorized to offer you full reinstatement, rank of commander, position as head of the new Combat Medical Training Division, full back pay and benefits, effective immediately if you accept. Garrison's hand touched Kate's shoulder, steady, supportive. Commander Brennan, Hayes said, the Navy wants you back. Kate looked at Blackwood, at his steady gaze, at the proof that her choices had been right even when they felt impossible. She looked at Garrison, at the mentor who'd emerged from the arrogant surgeon, at the father figure who'd learned to see her clearly. Years of hiding flashed through her mind, of being invisible, of believing she deserved to disappear. And she thought about the surgery she just performed, the teaching she'd done with Garrison, the knowledge she had that could save lives no one else could save. No, Kate said quietly. Hayes blinked. No? No, Kate repeated, stronger this time. I'm grateful for the vindication, for the truth being acknowledged, but I'm not going back to the Navy. Dr. Brennan, I'm exactly where I need to be, Kate said. She looked at Garrison, saw pride in his eyes, understanding. I'm building something here, something that uses what I learned in the places the Navy sent me, but on my terms, with my values, teaching the next generation how to do what I did without the guilt and blame and scapegoating. Hayes studied her face, then nodded slowly. I understand, and for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. She extended her hand. Kate shook it, firm grip, mutual respect. The offer stands if you change your mind, Hayes said, and if you need anything, resources, connections, support, the Navy owes you that much. Actually, Kate said slowly, an idea forming, there is something. I'm going to need patience, complex cases, combat injuries that civilian hospitals aren't equipped to handle. Can you help with that? Hayes smiled. Consider it done. After Hayes left, Kate sank back into the chair beside Blackwood's bed. Exhaustion hit her like a wave, physical and emotional, and years deep. You turned them down, Blackwood said. Why? Kate thought about it, about the Navy that had built her and broken her, about the hospital that had hidden her and was now letting her emerge, about the difference between running from the past and running towards something better. Because I'm done letting other people define what I'm worth, she said. I'm going to define it myself. Garrison cleared his throat. Actually, about that, I've been thinking. He moved to stand beside Kate. I'm 62 years old. I've been chief of surgery for 15 years, and I'm tired. Kate looked up at him. Richard, let me finish, Garrison said gently. I'm tired of bureaucracy, of politics, of administrative duties that keep me out of the OR more often than in it. But I'm not tired of surgery, not tired of teaching, and I'm not tired of building something meaningful. He paused, met her eyes. So I'm stepping down as chief, and I'm recommending you as director of a new division, Advanced Combat Trauma Institute, autonomous unit within the hospital. You build it, you run it, you teach it, and I'll be your senior advisor, if you'll have me. Kate stared at him. You're serious. Completely. You'd give up being chief to be part of something that matters more than titles, Garrison interrupted. To learn from someone who has knowledge I'll never have. To build a legacy that outlives both of us. He smiled slightly. Besides, you're a better surgeon than I am. It's time I admitted that. Kate felt something break open in her chest. Not pain, relief. The feeling of finding family in unexpected places. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll have you. Garrison's smile widened. Good, then we start tomorrow. The weeks that followed blurred together in the best possible way. Kate worked 18-hour days building the Institute from nothing. Garrison at her side, offering wisdom, making connections, using 40 years of institutional knowledge to support her vision. They recruited carefully, looking for surgeons who understood that combat medicine required different thinking, different protocols, different courage. Nathaniel Whitmore was their first hire. He stood in Kate's office, which was really just a repurposed storage room with a desk and 2 chairs, looking nervous and hopeful in equal measure. "I don't deserve this," he said. "No," Kate agreed. "You probably don't, but I'm not hiring you for what you deserve. I'm hiring you for what you can become." Whitmore swallowed hard. "I won't let you down." "See that you don't." The first week was difficult. Whitmore arrived early, left late, but moved through the Institute like he was walking on glass, afraid to break what little trust Kate had offered. Kate watched him struggle, watched him second-guess every decision. The confidence he'd had when lying at the inquiry was gone, replaced by doubt so thick it paralyzed him. After a particularly rough surgery, where Whitmore froze during a critical moment, Kate pulled him aside. "You're trying too hard," she said. "I can't afford mistakes," Whitmore replied. "Not after." "You're going to make mistakes," Kate interrupted. "Every surgeon does. The question is whether you learn from them or let them destroy you." She paused. "I made that choice years ago. I chose destruction. Don't make my mistake." Something shifted in Whitmore's eyes. Understanding. Permission to be imperfect. After that, he changed. Still worked the longest hours. Still asked the most questions. But now he moved with growing confidence. Not the arrogance of before. Something harder earned. Something real. 3 months in, he performed his first solo IED extraction. Kate supervised from the observation deck, Garrison beside her. "He's good," Garrison observed. "He will be," Kate corrected. "He's learning that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about building something better on top of it." Marcus Hartwell visited monthly, fully recovered now, bringing cases, bringing SEALs who needed surgeons who understood their injuries in ways civilian doctors couldn't, building a network of trust between military and medical that benefited everyone. "You're saving lives again," he told Kate one afternoon, "just like you did in Kandahar, except this time people know to say thank you." The Institute grew. 3 months in, they had 5 surgeons, 8 trauma nurses, equipment specifically designed for combat injuries, and a reputation spreading through military channels as the place that could handle cases no one else wanted. Kate taught constantly, in the OR, in conferences, one-on-one with residents who showed promise. She taught about fragment patterns, about pressure waves, about making impossible choices with grace instead of guilt. And slowly she taught herself that being visible wasn't the same as being vulnerable. One afternoon, Kate returned to her office to find a message on her desk. Handwritten, formal military script. "Dr. Brennan, I need your help. I've made mistakes I can't fix alone. Please, Captain S. Mitchell, U.S. Army Medical Corps." Kate stared at the note, recognized the weight in those words, the desperate hope of someone drowning in guilt. She'd been that person once. Someone had thrown her a lifeline. Now it was her turn to do the same. She made a note to call Mitchell back, set the message aside, turn back to patient files. Tomorrow. She'd call tomorrow. 6 months after that first surgery on Marcus Hartwell, Kate stood in her office reviewing patient files when someone knocked on the doorframe. She looked up. A young woman stood there, late 20s, Army uniform, captain's insignia, face pale, eyes haunted. "Dr. Brennan," the woman said, "I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell, Army trauma surgeon. She stopped, took a breath. "I made a mistake. In Mosul. 3 months ago. People died, and I don't know how to." Her voice broke. Kate stood slowly, recognized that look. That weight, that guilt. "Come in," she said gently. "Sit down." Captain Mitchell sat, hands clasped tightly in her lap, fighting tears. "Tell me what happened," Kate said. The story poured out. A field hospital, an attack, multiple casualties, impossible choices. Two deaths that Mitchell couldn't stop thinking about, couldn't stop replaying, couldn't stop believing were her fault. Kate listened, heard her own story reflected back, saw herself years ago, broken by mathematics that said you couldn't save everyone. When Mitchell finished, Kate was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke carefully, choosing words that would have saved her if someone had said them years ago. "How many casualties total?" Kate asked. 32. "How many did you save?" Mitchell hesitated. 30. 30 out of 32, Kate repeated. Under attack, in a field hospital, with limited resources. She leaned forward. "Captain Mitchell, that's not failure. That's extraordinary. But the two, were they survivable? Honestly." Mitchell closed her eyes. "No. One had a severed aorta. The other had massive head trauma. By the time they reached me, they were already gone," Kate finished. "And you know that. But you're carrying them anyway. Because that's what we do. We carry the ones we couldn't save instead of honoring the ones we did." Tears slipped down Mitchell's face. "How do you live with it?" Kate thought about that question, about years of trying to answer it wrong, about hiding in guilt and believing she deserved to disappear. "You don't live with it," she said finally. "You learn from it. You use it to become better. And you remember that the weight you're carrying, the people who died would want you to keep living, keep saving others, keep being the surgeon they needed, even if you couldn't be that for them." Mitchell looked up, hope flickering in haunted eyes. "Can you teach me that?" she asked. "How to be better?" Kate smiled. "Yes, that's exactly what we do here." She walked Mitchell out, introduced her to Garrison, who'd been standing quietly in the hallway, having heard the entire conversation. His eyes met Kate's. Pride there. Affection. The look of a father watching his daughter become exactly who she was meant to be. As Mitchell left to begin orientation, Kate glanced at the patient board. Rodriguez was scheduled for discharge tomorrow. Full recovery. Another life saved through knowledge earned in fire. She made a mental note to check on him before he left. Every patient mattered. Every choice honored. That evening, Kate stood in the observation deck overlooking the trauma wing, watching her team work, Garrison teaching a resident, Whitmore performing a procedure with confidence he'd earned through dedication, Mitchell starting orientation with nurses who understood combat medicine. Blackwood appeared beside her, walking without a limp now, fully healed, but still checking in, still part of this family they'd accidentally built. "You did it," he said. "Built something that matters." "We did it," Kate corrected. "All of us, together. Still, you're the one who came back from the dead, the ghost surgeon who decided to stop being invisible." Kate thought about that, about years of hiding, about Marcus Hartwell bringing truth in a classified folder, about Garrison offering mentorship when she'd expected judgment, about all the people who'd given her reasons to step back into the light. "I'm not a ghost," she said quietly. "I never was. I was just someone who forgot who she was for a while. And now?" Kate looked at her team, at lives being saved through knowledge she'd earned in fire, at legacy building with every surgery, every teaching moment, every doctor she trained to do what she did. "Now I remember," she said. Blackwood nodded, started to leave, then stopped. "Hey, Doc, the guys are coming next month. Everyone who served with you in Kandahar. We're having a reunion, here, at the Institute." He smiled. "And we're bringing someone special. Remember the kids from the West Wing? The ones you pulled from the rubble? 6 of them are medical students now. Because of you. They want to meet the surgeon who saved their lives." Kate's breath caught. All these years she'd carried the weight of 2 deaths. never stopped to honor the 45 lives, never let herself remember the children who lived because she'd made impossible choices. "They're alive," she whispered. "They're thriving," Blackwood corrected, "because you chose them, because you did everything right." Kate felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'd like that." After he left, Garrison joined her at the observation window. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their shared vision become reality. "Thank you," Kate said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me when I'd worked very hard to be invisible." Garrison was quiet for a moment. "I spent 18 years angry at the wrong people, 18 years blaming field surgeons for my brother's death, when the truth was much more complicated." He looked at her. "You gave me clarity, showed me that the people doing impossible work in impossible places deserve understanding, not blame. So thank you." "We saved each other," Kate said. "Yes," Garrison agreed, "we did." They stood together as evenings settled over Austin, the hospital continuing its rhythms below. Lives being saved, choices being made, legacy being built one patient at a time. Kate thought about a young Navy surgeon she'd been, idealistic, skilled, certain that if she just worked hard enough, she could save everyone. She thought about the broken woman she'd become, hidden, guilty, believing invisibility was the same as safety. And she thought about who she was now, director, teacher, mentor. Someone who'd learned that you couldn't save everyone, but you could honor those you did by continuing to try. Someone who'd stopped running from her past and started building on it instead. The intercom crackled. "Dr. Brennan to Trauma Bay. Critical incoming." Kate turned from the window. Garrison met her eyes across the observation deck. No words needed, just understanding, just partnership, just two surgeons who'd found purpose in the wreckage of their pasts. Together, they walked toward the trauma wing, not running from ghosts, running toward life. Below them, the trauma wing glowed in the gathering darkness. Through the observation window, Kate could see her team. Garrison would guide a young resident through a procedure. Whitmore would review scans with quiet confidence earned through dedication. Mitchell would laugh with nurses who understood what she'd survived. The lights of Memorial Hospital shone warm against the Texas night. Beacon for those who needed help. Promise for those seeking second chances. Legacy for those who came after. Kate Brennan walked down the corridor beside the man who'd become family. No longer invisible, no longer hiding, just being exactly who she'd always been meant to be. A surgeon who saved lives. A teacher who built futures. A woman who'd learned that the most dangerous thing wasn't being seen, it was believing you deserved to disappear. She'd never make that mistake again.